Is it a BMX bike? Is it a MiniVelo or micro ATV? I don't know. The only thing I do know is the Itty Bitty by the Austin brand Coyote is stupid fun. So I'm no stranger to small wheeled bikes. My very first custom bike was actually a Bike Friday New World Tourist. Laura and I have toured on a Brompton, and I've also tested the Molten on this channel. I did hop on a Neutrino ages ago, but it's been a while. But most of those bikes were generally more road oriented with narrower tires. The Coyote, however, allows for some bigger meets. It takes standard 20-inch BMX tires with clearances up to 2.4. Talk about supple. Coyote, the brand, is based in Austin. The frames are built in Taiwan. The frame and fork are made from 4130 chromoly steel. The brakes are mechanical discs on this bike, and they stop surprisingly well. I don't know if it's because of the smaller wheel or what have you, but there was never a lack of braking power. The hubs are quick release, and on the rear it does have a sliding dropout that gives you, I believe, about 3 centimeters of fore and aft adjustment. Looking at the controls, you've got this super fun looking moto style handlebar with 5.5 inches of rise. The shifters are SRAM X5 and the levers are some kind of Avid lever. Although not the most baller components out there, it shifted perfectly the entire time I've had it. The bike is set up 1x with a crank from FSA, and in the rear you've got an 11-32 cassette in 9-speed. Paired with the current crank, it actually had a pretty decent range for casual riding on rolling terrain. Now, you miss out on the gear inches on the extreme ends, so if you're going to be contesting for a field sprint or going bike packing over mountain passes, you're probably going to have to mod the gearing a bit. But if you're just riding casually around town, say you're commuting around campus or something, gearing works great. The seat post dimension is 31.6, so fairly easy to find a dropper post that will work with it. I think this bike makes an awesome candidate for those like crotch lever droppers that I like so much. It's perfect if you want to get rad or if you want to share this bike with other family members who might be of differing heights. Makes it super easy to adjust that saddle height. Another nice thing about the frame is that it's fully outfitted to take racks. You've got a mid-fork eyelet as well as eyelets to put a bottle cage. You could probably fashion some kind of cargo rack on there. And then on the rear, it's got eyelets for a rear rack. So you could totally kit this bike out for commuting or even bike touring. I know what you're thinking, who is this bike going to fit? The bike is described as a one size fits most with a height range from 5 feet to 6'1". Philip, the owner of Coyote, is actually 6'4" and rides the bike and doesn't seem to have a problem with it. In terms of adjustability, you can tilt the handlebars, you could probably swap out the stem a bit, so there is some play in adjusting the reach. And the seat tube angle is such so that as you raise the saddle, it also pushes the seat back, therefore increasing the length of the cockpit. I'm about 5'8", and the bike fit me great, and that rhymed for some reason. Probably my only complaint is that I wish the bars had a little bit more sweep back to them. I know this is like a personal issue here. Personally, I can't do bars that are too flat. It aggravates my carpal tunnel from editing all these videos that you guys get to watch. So for me to set this bike up for long-term comfort, it might take some searching to find a moto bar with this much rise and 25 degrees of back sweep. I don't know, maybe they exist. I don't know, you tell me in the comments. On our scale, the bike actually weighs about 29 pounds, which is a little bit surprising given that it looks so small and petite. If you guys enjoy this focus on interesting, kind of strangish bikes, please consider supporting the channel by joining us on Patreon or stopping by the store and picking up some merch. We still have some stem caps as well as like I think 5 of these performance Paisley cycling caps, so be sure to get those before they're gone. How does the bike ride and who is it for? There weren't any geocharts, so I had to do a little bit of guessing and measuring. The rear, as I tested it, I didn't really get a chance to play with the sliding dropouts. Measured in at about 410, and the front trail, for my best guesstimate, is in the 70s. All that to say that despite it having a smaller wheel size, the front end was surprisingly normal, if not leaning towards the stable side of the handling spectrum. Unlike, say, the Brompton or even the Molten, where the handling dips into the more responsive side and usually takes a few rides or some weight on the front to kind of chill it out, the Itty Bitty felt instantly rideable and comfortable. In fact, I could ride no-handed pretty much from the get-go, whereas the Brompton, when I hop on that, it definitely takes me a couple rides before I can ride it no-handed. Basically, if you have any qualms about a small wheel bike feeling a little bit squirrely, this is definitely not that bike. Interestingly, the bike also has that jumpy feeling from having short chainstay as well as combined with small wheels. It definitely accelerates in a herky-jerky kind of motion. In terms of climbing, I thought the bike actually did surprisingly well. Definitely doesn't wander like a drunken goat. It has that nice and responsive rear. If there's any downside to this bike in terms of climbing, it's something that's endemic to all small wheel bikes in that you lose momentum fairly quickly, so you generally have to keep the pressure on the pedals to keep your speed up. This is something I noticed with the Bike Friday as well as the Brompton. Not the fault of the bike, but it's just kind of part and parcel of the wheel size. On flat terrain, the story is the same, again with the rhyming. The bike feels completely normal. It just like cruises through the gravel. After a few minutes, you forget that you're on a smaller wheeled bike. The main thing being that you do have to be a little bit more cautious around like big divots or potholes or something. That's something that can affect these small wheels, but the wide tires are pretty supple. Go figure. Going downhill, this is where things got interesting. I took it on some green trails that I take a lot of the test bikes on, and I found that the big meets were pretty forgiving. I did have to be a little bit more active in avoiding small wheel swallowing like divots and bumps. They're not really bumps, they're kind of the opposite of bumps. But generally speaking, the bike felt surprisingly composed and stable. I've definitely ridden larger wheel bikes that have, let's say, steeper head tube angles that didn't feel as stable on the same terrain as with this bike. It really gave me those mini ATB vibes. So who is this bike for? Where would it fit on your stable? I think this bike makes perfect sense for an urban commuter living in a small space. Its diminutive size makes it easier to stash away in the corner of an apartment, and it also makes it a lot easier to get on a commuter train. If you do a lot of multimodal commuting, this might be a bike to look at. I think it's also a great bike for a family household that wants to share one bike among multiple people, or maybe a guest bike. Or if you've got a child that's in the middle of a growth spurt and you don't want to buy them a new bike every year. While the one size fits most won't provide like the most optimized and dialed fit, I found it perfectly comfortable and rideable for a shortish ride. Could you take it touring or bike packing? Absolutely. If you can do it with a Brompton like we did, you can definitely do it with this bike. It would take some modifications in terms of gearing, and you'd probably have to spend a little bit more money and time dialing in the cockpit so it's comfortable for those longish rides. But it feels pretty herky. It's got the eyelets, you've got the big meets. I don't see why you couldn't take it touring. So lastly, if you want a bike that's just for funsies, that forces you not to take yourself too seriously, then this is a great bike for that. It's hard to focus on the aero and the watts when you're feeling like a circus bear on a bike. So if you're intrigued with the concept of a MiniVelo, but not thrilled about sourcing parts and trying to put it together yourself, then the Itty Bitty Complete is actually a great one-stop shop option. I know some people are going to look at it as just a purely novelty item, and there's definitely some aspect of that, but with its stable and comfortable handling, its ability to take racks, it makes it a totally fun and viable option for a lot of people. So what do you guys think of MiniVelos? Are they tools or toys? Do you ride one yourself? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this content, join us on Patreon so I can bring you more fun and weird bike stuff that other channels won't look at, or pick up some stickers and some merch. And as always, keep the supple side down.